Hello everyone, I'm Megan Sullivan and welcome to my full review of Final Fantasy XVI, developed and published by Square Enix for the PlayStation 5. You know the drill. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe and click that little bell, and I'll be sure to bring you more video game goodness in the future. Thank you. So after about 60-ish hours of action-packed adventure full of giant icons, i.e. Final Fantasy summons, and Game of Thrones-esque characters and antics, do I think Final Fantasy XVI is a worthy entry into the long-running series? Is it everything I wanted from an action game, a role-playing game, a Final Fantasy game? Yes, it's awesome. But also, well, no, not exactly. Don't get me wrong, I finished every single side quest before moving on to the final boss, so obviously I enjoyed myself quite a bit. Make no mistake, Final Fantasy XVI is definitely a Game of the Year contender. But there are some things about this game that stick in my craw a little bit, and that's preventing me from proclaiming it a masterpiece, and I'm curious if other people had the same issues. If you feel the same, be sure to leave a spoiler-free comment in the comment section below. But first, let's talk about all the good stuff. Now keep in mind my number one rule about video games is that a game has to be a good game first. It can't be janky, it can't be broken, it can't have weird input issues, etc, etc. And on that account, Final Fantasy XVI is pretty flawless, as are the spectacular graphics and music. Final Fantasy XVI is a visual feast full of eye-popping colors and details, spectacular animation, and a gazillion particle effects. But my favorite thing about the visuals is the scale. The size and power of icons in this game is just so impressive. I've always loved Final Fantasy summons, but Final Fantasy XVI is the first game to really give us a street-level view of just how massive and utterly destructive these beings are on both a macro and micro level. Final Fantasy XVI poses a question: what is it really like to be on the wrong side of Shiva's diamond dust? And the answer, pardon the pun, is absolutely bone-chilling. Good thing the music is hot. I'm not using the soundtrack here because of potential copyright issues, but trust me when I say composer Masayoshi Soken strings together a series of absolute bangers, some of which I've had looping on my playlist for days. The soundtrack is rich and robust where it needs to be, soft and subtle at just the right moment. Along with some nice haptic feedback and excellent sound effects, Final Fantasy XVI is a bonanza for the senses. But let's talk about combat, because it is hands down the best thing about Final Fantasy XVI. Square Enix decided to go full action RPG here, and was clearly inspired by games like Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, and Nier Automata. In fact, to ensure that they got the combat right, the developer brought in part of the team from Platinum Games. A wise decision if you're going the Bayonetta route. And this investment pays off big. Battles are a fast and furious experience that often left me giddy. Through the player avatar, aka Clive Rossfield, whom I'll talk about in a second, players turn into a one-man army as they hold shoulder triggers and smash face buttons to string together whirlwind combos that combine regular attacks with icon skills, which are elemental spells that stem from the powers of familiar Final Fantasy summons like Garuda, Bahamut, Titan, etc. The animation for these icon skills is spectacular, and when you follow up, say, a Titanic Fist with a Judgment Bolt and then blast enemies in the face with Mega Flare, it looks and feels amazing. Of course, pulling off endless strings of flashy combos means juggling a bunch of cooldowns for these spells, but your patience is rewarded when you unleash these attacks back to back to back. And in the meantime, you can pick off enemy health with more distant attacks or quickly hit monsters with a flurry of sword strikes while smoothly dodging enemy counterpunches. Input is fast and responsive, and thanks to an easy-to-understand heads-up display, you'll know exactly when your spells are ready to fire off because little nodes above icons of your icons will turn a bright color associated with that icon's elemental power. Now, you can only equip 3 icons at a time, but you can swap out your icons between battles, so there's plenty of opportunity to mess around with attack combos to see what works and what doesn't. And you can't really go wrong here, especially because the game offers 2 difficulty modes plus minor accessibility options like equipment that can help Clive evade easier or pull off combos via a single button. So your experience can be as challenging or beginner-friendly as you want, a feature I really appreciate. But I should note that there's actually 2 components to combat. The second component involves outrageous icon fights, where 2 summons do get out for supremacy on the ground and in the sky. I'll be honest, I feel a little conflicted about these battles. On the one hand, they're pretty on rails, and they don't really feel like they belong in a Final Fantasy game. On the other hand, they're so bonkers, they're kind of awesome. And you can tell the good people at Square Enix had a blast making them. Final Fantasy XVI is clearly going for a totally different vibe than its predecessors when it comes to the action. And the action is so much fun. I just wish it hadn't come at the cost of paring back the role-playing elements. That's not to say that there are none. There are side quests, health and stamina bars, you earn experience points and gain levels, which up your stats, and you earn skill points in battle that you can use to upgrade your icon spells in whatever order you see fit. And the game actively encourages you to go on special missions and monster hunts to earn money or find better material to upgrade all your gear, which is categorized by rarity, not unlike, say, Diablo 4, which I just played. So it's recognizably an RPG, but customization is actually pretty limited. And although I understand that this is a Clive show because the action follows the one-person army formula of DMC and Bayonetta, I still miss a proper party system. There's no tank, healer, DPS trinity here, it's really just Clive, plus a revolving door of guest stars controlled by the game's AI. And that's a little too bad because I really like a lot of the supporting cast in Final Fantasy XVI and wish I could pick and choose who to take on missions a la Dragon Age or Mass Effect, especially because some of the writing for the side characters is really good. Speaking of writing, that brings me to the narrative, which I'm also a little conflicted about. For those who don't know, Final Fantasy XVI follows the story of Clive Rossfield, the firstborn son of the Archduke of Rosaria, on his quest for both vengeance against those who horribly murdered his family, and to free himself of the shackles imposed upon him literally by men and metaphorically by fate. While on his journey, Clive gets entangled in the ongoing war between the 6 nations of Valisthea, which are fighting over the use of mother crystals, whose increasingly rare ether powers the magic people use in their everyday lives. These wars are not only fought with men, though. Each nation has its own icon, wielded by gifted magic users known as dominants, who use the icon's power to defend or attack at will. These armies also use enslaved magic users known as branded as part of their vanguard. It's during Clive's journey that he discovers he can actually absorb the power of icons and use them himself. This talent is noticed and put to use by Cid Telemon, the sexiest and coolest Cid we've seen since Final Fantasy VII's Cid Highwind, who recognizes Clive's skills in battle and recruits him to help not only upend the social inequality that allows magic users to be enslaved and used as weapons of war, but rid the world of its overdependence on magic by destroying the mother crystals. This in turn leads to a much larger conflict that involves attempting to save the world from a big baddie because, of course it does. Now, I admit the developers' attempts to tackle the issues of slavery and freedom are a bit heavy-handed and kind of clumsy in places, but at least the message that slavery is arbitrary and evil and shouldn't exist is earnest. And the story is at its best when it stays grounded in reality. I think the reason I like the side missions in this game so much is that they not only reward you with special items and the chance to expand your inventory, so don't forget to do side missions with a plus sign because that's what those do. It's during these missions that Clive gets to know his fellow freedom fighters and the state of the ongoing war that's tearing the land apart. Characters like Gav, Lady Karen, and Blackthorn feel like real people, and I'm surprised by how many NPCs not only get a proper backstory, but how they actually end up playing a bigger part in the overall narrative. There are a lot of them, however, which is why I appreciate the handy-dandy active time lore system, a feature that lets you pause the action and take a refresher course on who's who and who did what, whether they're a major or minor character. Now, you can look up this information in more detail by visiting the game's central headquarters, known as a hideaway, and talking to scholars, but the ATL system is much more convenient, although I wish the developer hadn't leaned so heavily on it to fill in some of the plot details. For example, I could not understand Cid's relationship to another NPC until I completed a series of side quests that filled in the NPC's biography. But other than that, whenever Final Fantasy XVI had its feet on the ground, it definitely had my attention. But it's when it suddenly had its head in the cosmic clouds that it started to lose me. During the closing hours of the game, all the character and world building feels cast aside in favor of telling some tropey fairy tale about needing to save the world from a terrible godlike being. I know that's a Final Fantasy tradition, but it feels out of place in a game that is trying so hard to distance itself from its predecessors. And it doesn't help that towards the end of Clive's adventure, the pacing and writing take a noticeable dive, culminating in an ambiguous ending that isn't bad per se. I get what Square Enix was going for, but it's not all that satisfying either. Still, despite the story tripping at the finish line, I did enjoy it overall, and more importantly, I enjoyed the gameplay. So much so that now that I've unlocked Final Fantasy mode, which is essentially New Game Plus with its extra content and challenges, I might just dive back into the world of Philistia and see if there's anything I missed. This is a great game with spectacular visuals, music, and combat mechanics. I wish the story had focused more on the dire consequences of over-relying on natural resources and human exploitation to better people's lives, but interesting characters and side missions carry the story to the finish line, and there's always room for DLC to smooth over some of these wrinkles. At least I hope so. Final Fantasy XVI may not be a masterpiece, but it's pretty darn close. What did you guys think of the game? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, guys. See you later.